Okay, this meeting is being live streamed. Got it. Okay.
Oh, still got it.
Awesome. So we are live then, it looks like. Potentially, hopefully. The first few minutes of every Mystical Monday is us going, I think we're live. Awesome. I think we are. Now I've got it on two screens, so I'm confident that we are live. So hello, Seaside Shadows, and welcome to Mystical Monday. It is Courtney and Andrew here, and Evan should be joining us a little bit later on, or hopefully in a few minutes. We'll see him. But we know it's been a while since we've done a Mystical Monday with you. And so we are very excited to be here right before October begins to recap some of our recent segments that we've all had and some interesting things. And look, Evan's coming in, so I'm going to let him in right now into our little chat. Awesome. So we're just going to talk a little bit tonight about four of our recent segments. Four of the segments, including, hi, Evan. I don't know if you can hear. Oh, I'm going to ask you to unmute so that we can hear you.
Your request is granted.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
So now, folks, you have all three of us here. So we're just going to chat a little bit about some of the recent segments we had, and then we're going to update everybody on what we have going on coming up in October, which is everything's going on, right? So anything and everything, and we're really, really excited about it. But we haven't done a Mystical Monday for the last one. We couldn't do because one of those weird remnant hurricanes came by and knocked out my power. So now we are here to recap a few different things. So we're going to go all the way back a little bit to a Cemetery Saturday that I did. What's got to be now over a month with Major General John Sedgwick out of Cornwall, Connecticut. So that was one I did. And then Evan, I'm going to put you on tap to talk a little bit about the Wallingford Shoebox.
Sure.
So Major General John Sedgwick, and feel free, folks, if you watch these, to ask us any questions in the comments. We're keeping an eye on it as best we can. We haven't been good about it in previous episodes, but we're endeavoring to be better. So Major General John Sedgwick is actually one of my favorite people, probably in the history of the Civil War, but he was one of those people who I felt like spiritually, and Andrew can attest to this, I found out about like really late in the game. So I was researching all these Civil War folks for my book that's coming out next month, and I took all these fabulous tours with historians around these battlefields and asked them to just, you know, inundate me with Connecticut knowledge, right, and Connecticut people. And Andrew, you were even on, you know, some of these journeys, and yep. For whatever reason, Gettysburg and beyond, no one told me about John Sedgwick, right? So I go through, and somehow I even missed the entire statue of him upon his horse at the Battle of Gettysburg battlefield, right? So like, somehow he has eluded me, right? And then he is from Cornwall, Connecticut. His home still stands. It's apparently been redone. And true story, when I was filming this segment, I saw people that are neighbors to said home, and I ran up to them in the middle of the road and asked them a bunch of questions. And they probably thought I was a crazy woman, but they answered them and dealt with me, you know, just in the middle of nowhere. This woman's like, tell me about that house. And that was me. So when we were filming, how did I find out about him eventually? Well, when I was writing my book, I was writing about the Battle of Spotsylvania. And it came to my attention that there was this really morbidly funny story about a general who, you know, died at Spotsylvania, but his last words, you know, were they couldn't shoot an elephant from this distance right when he got shot. So sad, but humorous, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, who is this man? And he's in a lot of tales of, strange Civil War tales. Well, it's Major General John Sedgwick. And he's this, bachelor from the Northwest Hills of Connecticut. He was in his early 50s, but he kind of had one of those kind, like chubby faces, which you don't see often in the Civil War soldiers. And he was one of the only generals that had no complaints from his men. They all kind of really liked him and thought of him as a friend. And it was said that when he did die, obviously the news of his last words wasn't the first thing delivered to the masses. But when he did die and Ulysses S. Grant was told, he asked to confirm 3 times that the information was true because he really didn't want to lose Sedgwick. He said, he's one of, my best men. So I'm thinking, what a fascinating individual. And then when I found out he was from Connecticut, I thought, I wrote my whole book without this man. I am a terrible person. And then I'm like, well, do we have anything about him in Connecticut? We sure do. We have an enormous monument to him across from the cemetery. And then his burial monument is enormous. So we kind of show both in this particular Cemetery Saturday segment. So now it is my goal. And if you come on a tour, you'll probably hear me mention him, to make sure to, allow for the fact that he's not fully developed character in my book, that he gets play everywhere else at Seaside Shadows. So he was well worth a visit up to Cornwall, Connecticut. It's a beautiful cemetery called Cornwall Hollow. All of his family members are buried in there. His parents, his siblings. He came from a pretty well-to-do family. He actually had his home built, the one that I was running through the street asking about, to come home to after the end of the war. So even though it was built to his specifications and it's an enormous, beautiful Victorian home that kind of abuts his and his family's farmland, he didn't actually get to live in it. So when you drive by, you will see what he designed, which is great. But from what I'm told, it has been modernized inside and is very commercial at present. So that's just something to know should you drive by. But it's definitely worth visiting. It's one of the stranger and more peculiar tales of the Civil War. The fact that those were his last words. He was shot directly under the eye. So there's some pretty grotesque documentation about that spurting as he fell to the ground. And, there's a lot about him, but definitely worth a visit, and it was something that I was glad I could do. If you haven't heard or watched the segment yet, I encourage you to go back and do it. He deserves all our attention. He deserves more than he's been given. So very, very cool guy. And he is also the highest ranking general to have passed away in the Civil War. So, in combat. So that's pretty impressive. And, a Connecticut born and bred gentleman right there. And no, I do not know why he was still a bachelor. I have questions, but we'll get to that another time. I don't know. In his 50s, he apparently courted many ladies. I don't know. I have questions, including, are there children we don't know about? A question I also have. So I will endeavor to find that out as well. I don't know. There were just like varying ladies buried not too far from him either, which made me curious, of the same age. I have curiosities. I do. Yeah. I do. Who are they? Does he know them? He must know them, but maybe he just couldn't settle down. Commitment phobe. I don't know. I'm sure.
Did he know them or did he know them?
Right. And like, how is he so beloved by everybody, right? He's everyone's friend. The ladies love him. Something about this charming man tells me he has secrets.
Maybe he was a ladies' man, or maybe he was in search of a beard. I don't know,
Right.
Different era. Right?
There's another general that I did write about. He was the first general to die in the Civil War, also from Connecticut. We seem to get all these weird titles for our dead generals, but Nathaniel Lyon, who was also a bachelor when he died very early on in the war. So Sedgwick dies at the end or near the end at Spotsylvania, and Lyon dies in 1861 in Wilson's Creek, in the Missouri-Kansas region. And he was a bachelor too, but, he was not loved by his men. They thought that he was quite curmudgeon-y and cranky, and they also often called him Dad because he was like so like patronizing.
Wow.
But he did write in his diaries a little bit about the lack of females in his life, and in his letters to his mother, because she was pleading with him to get married, and he was always like, I'm so sorry. But there's rumors that he was dating someone when the war took off, courting someone, shall we say, and then when he came back on a visit home, she was married to another man, and so he went out trying to court other women, but they all told him that he was too short and ugly. And he was very hurt by this and had to tell his mom that the women didn't like him. So sometimes there's sad reasons, and I thought, oh my gosh, they just told him that. But
I mean, if he lived, being a general probably would have helped. I mean,
right? Like, I get
just saying, those stars, like that's catnip to ladies in the Civil War, right?
Well, the thing is, too, is like maybe that's why all the men found him so cranky.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
So I don't know. I think, and he said during the Mexican-American War that he also was rejected several times. So I think, that probably did make him bothered. I don't know.
It also seems like he might have been a little short and ugly. I mean,
I know. What the thing was, and I take personal offense to this, he was a redhead, and the lady said they didn't like that.
Anti-ginger discrimination, man. There's no bounds. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Poor Nathaniel Lyon. By the way, if you want to visit a spooky place, visit the birthplace of Nathaniel Lyon. It is a state park in Ashford/Eastford, Connecticut, middle of nowhere also. And all that stands is the hearth and chimney that was part of the house. But it is a state park, and you can walk around, and it's down, Lyon Road by General Lyon Cemetery, where he is interred. But he is a very kind of fascinating Connecticut figure, and he is a little bit spooky because there's some spooky activity that happens at the house. I prefer, and to tell people if they visit him, to bring him mustard, because apparently he loved putting mustard on everything he ate. So usually when I visit his grave, I leave him a little bottle of mustard. So it tends to make him talk a bit more in investigations, to butter him up a little bit. So definitely check out some of the spooky general spots. But Sedgwick is, one of those bizarre tales. They couldn't shoot an elephant from this distance. And then there he goes. And there are some really amazing portraits done of his final moments that we also showed in the segment that are heartbreaking, but also give you an idea of how very real it was to have this man sort of collapse in front of you that was your general. Sedgwick was a general in Spotsylvania, Gettysburg, Antietam. Like, he was everywhere before he gets taken out at the end. So it's pretty tragic, versus Lyon, who just went in really mad that not everybody in the world was an abolitionist and then ended up getting shot. So, two very different types of generals here. But any questions about them, always feel free to shoot them our way. But Evan, I'm going to pass it over to you. I would love to hear from you a bit about the Wallingford Shoebox Murder, and who you think committed said murder.
Oh, I have theories. I do. Now, I mean, to set this up, right, for our dear viewers, if you didn't see the segment, this is a murder that has bedeviled Wallingford, Connecticut. For doing quick math here, 135 years. So that's a long time, right? Because it was so grotesque, it was so bizarre and so mysterious that, like, I mean, it captures the imagination. So let's set it up, go to the beginning. We are talking about, oh, it also, by the way, Courtney, has a Civil War connection as well.
My
At
favorite.
least at least at the beginning, because I mean, like, more twists and turns than a freaking roller coaster. Just saying, right? So we start on a day in 1886 when this guy named Edward Turl or Turrell, spellings varied back then. It was nothing was standardized. So Edward Turl is out, like, walking along the edge of a swamp in Wallingford, taking his dog for the morning constitutional, when they're passing by this, like, clump of bushes, and the dog starts going towards the bushes, sniffing and acting a little weird. So they go towards that, and Edward finds this box. It's this box that's labeled as a shoebox, not like a shoebox like containing a pair of shoes, like a box containing what would be a dozen pairs of shoes. It's like, Shoebox Murder sounds way better than like crate that contains shoes murder, right? So that's part of what's going on. But
Yeah.
like, so, okay, so you got this box though, right? And so the dog is going nuts on this box. So he's about to move on, but then he starts to smell something really rank, like a foul odor emanating from this box that's in this clump of bushes, right? And has no earthly business being there because it's, next to a swamp off the beaten path. So he goes back to Wallingford. He gets like his brother and a buddy. They go out there with a crowbar and they open it up. And what they find in this box is a male human torso wrapped in tar paper, lying in a bed of blood-soaked straw. So that would be where the odor was coming from. Yeah.
I'm going to pause you right there. So I already have a question.
Yeah.
Isn't it a little bizarre that, and maybe this is just me not regarding my surroundings, but he finds this strange box on his walk, and then before trying to open it himself, he goes to make sure he has potential witnesses?
That is something that the constabulary at the time paid some attention to.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to preview, there were so many other potential perpetrators that they quickly moved on from Edward Turl and his brother and friend because, like, they were just guys, right? Like, why would he put a box in the bushes and then be like, hey, let's go open this box? Like, okay, because here's the thing. I'm going to jump a little bit ahead, but I'm going to give you little spoilers. That torso belonged to a person who had died 5 to 10 days earlier. So that box could have been there for close on a week, right?
Okay.
And I'm saying, if somebody's going to go to the trouble of dismembering a corpse that thoroughly, they're not going to be like, hey, look at this torso I found.
Right.
Let me just have scrutiny put upon me and, trust that I'm such a stone cold sociopath. I'm going to lie, right?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
You
could have just put it in the swamp, right? I mean, just, yeah.
Right.
So that's one suspect that we don't know, but I personally am going to eliminate.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. So, it gets so much weirder. So much weirder. This is why, Courtney, when you put me on this, because I'll tell you, folks, Courtney, assigned this to me, and I was like salivating by the time I'd read, like, a paragraph, right? I mean, because, so check this out. So Edward Turl and his buddies unearth this, like, ghastly freaking sight, okay? So it goes to the doctor. The doctor does sort of a half-assed autopsy. Then it goes to New Haven so it can get a real, actual, full workup. Now, not all of it goes to New Haven. Only the stomach and intestines go to New Haven, okay? The rest of the corpse, that's the important parts. That's because, but here is an important part. The local cops wouldn't know it yet, but the man did not die of dismemberment. Fortunate for him, I gotta say.
Yeah.
He died of acute arsenic poisoning. So what Turl and his friends found in that Wallingford swamp was the cover-up of a murder, not the evidence of the murder itself. So again,
Gotcha.
now here's the thing. At this point, if you're a cop, you're waiting for the stomach content analysis to come back. You have this crazy freaking thing, this macabre sight that is invading your quiet, peaceful town. You have two problems right off the bat. Number one, you don't know who did it, right? There's no obvious suspects other than Edward, who was eliminated pretty quickly from the suspect list. Number two, you don't know who was murdered because it's 1886. There's not going to be any DNA analysis. There's not going to be any, nothing. I mean, people don't have a lot of tattoos at that point. If he did, they'd be down at the docks being like, hey, you know this guy. But, that's...
It reminds me of someone on our tour.
Ah, yes.
No spoilers, though.
Right. Indeed. So the cops are simultaneously looking for the murderer, and the victim, and they're trying to figure out the victim first, because if you know the victim, you might know you obviously know people who know the victim, possible motivations. Was the person dirty in crime? Was the person, he's stolen somebody's wife or something, whatever it is. I am going to tell you, I don't know if I have a clear suspect for who the body is. However, I will tell you, I have a 60% feeling if I knew one other thing, I would be able to tell you who the victim actually was. All right. So the cops are spreading out along town, right? They're looking for stuff, what they get from their initial examination. And this is where the record gets a little hinky, right? Because newspapers weren't that reliable at the time. Some accounts say that this dismemberment, this, torso that was found in a box of shoes, was done expertly. So that led to the cops questioning all sorts of butchers and stuff. Like every butcher in the greater New Haven area got a visit from a constable being like, hey, you kill somebody and put them in a box in the woods? They were like, no. So they also thought about maybe medical students. Yale is right nearby, right? They're questioning all of these people. And at the same time, they're trying to figure out a victim. The first person who came to mind was a Civil War veteran. He was a well-known Civil War vet from the area. Sorry, I have to, go behind the curtain and look at my notes for a second because I don't remember the gentleman's name offhand.
That's fine, because now I'm curious. I'm like, do I know him? Like, personally? No.
Right. Well, you look great for your age if you did. Because so it was Albert J. Cooley was, it was a Civil War vet. And he'd been working in a factory, for a while, had just collected this big pension and then promptly disappeared. So like, well, maybe, and he was kind of known as sort of like a vagrant character. He was like working and respected, but also, a little shady. And so they're like, okay, maybe like somebody figured out that he got this $1,500 pension from a factory, big shakes in the 1880s. And somebody knocked him off and took the $1,500. Okay, maybe. There was also apparently an outbreak of hooliganry in the area. There were a number of ne'er-do-wells and firebugs who had been causing mischief around there. So they like sort of shook down all the neighborhood problem kids, and they came up with nothing. They didn't know about anybody killing anybody, didn't know about anybody dying. Okay.
Right.
All right, so, but here's the thing, right? Like, if this sounds complicated, I'm simplifying. This was all over the map. They held like this local prostitute who turned out to be like what we would call bipolar nowadays for like 2 months because she made up some crap about knowing who it was, and she had no idea.
2 months.
I mean, yeah. Oh, this poor lady. Again, I got to look at the notes, but she was this poor lady.
Did she try to claim credit for it?
Well, she said she knew who had done it. and had like proof of it. But it turned out that she kind of just needed a place to stay.
Oh,
Yeah, it was like, and she had been a notorious, lady of the night around there, and had been connected to another crime. But like, yeah, it just turned out that she was just like looking for attention and kindness. It was very, very sad. That's why I didn't during the session. I didn't spend a lot of time on it because it's sad. So
yeah.
here's the deal. Let's go all the way forward to the absolute most bonkers and fun theory of the case. It was not long before this that the infamous Haymarket riots in Chicago had occurred. Okay. This was during a huge upswing in the labor movement. This is when federal troops and private detectives were shooting labor demonstrators, like the height of the Gilded Age. Okay. So people were mad on both sides. Sound familiar? And paranoid, about, like, on the business side, they were paranoid about communist, labor agitators overrunning society. On the other side, they were paranoid, not so paranoid because it was happening, about people literally coming and shooting them for demonstrating for, a 10-hour workday. So that was all happening. And Connecticut at the time was known as a dumping ground for bodies killed during crimes. Because our police forces, there was no state police force, so the municipal polices were known as being so either incompetent or corrupt that we had a ridiculously low rate of murders being solved. So we became a garbage heap for dead humans.
So shameful. That's so shameful.
So with the Haymarket riot and all of this stuff, it got into people's heads that there was a labor leader who had been killed because he knew too much in the aftermath of the Haymarket riot. He had been murdered or lured to Connecticut to be murdered, and then had been poisoned with arsenic, because at this point everybody knew about the stomach and intestines autopsy in New Haven. So so that was the craziest theory. It held no water. All that the connection was the shoebox, the box of shoes, had been made in Fall River and shipped to Chicago. So that was it. So the fact that Chicago, that was the Chicago connection. Like somebody bought the box 2 weeks earlier and then it ended up in a swamp in Wallingford. But they made up this whole like, oh yeah, it was this firebrand labor leader, it was lured to Wallingford and killed. So if you want to know who I think, because you do, I can see it.
I do.
Yes. So here's what I think. The story I left out is who I think the murder victim is. He was a guy named Charles Hall. He was a notorious thug in the vicinity of the town, and had been reputedly hired by a magnate, a mill and factory owner, to commit arson for profit. I fully believe that this Charles Hall, who escaped actually, so the arsons happened. He then escaped from being transferred between jail and prison. A couple of weeks passed, and then the body was found. I think it is I don't know who committed the murder. I don't know who committed at all the dismemberment. Oh, by the way, they did find the arms and legs several weeks later, also wrapped in tar paper near the swamp. So I don't know who did the deed. I suspect it was on the orders of either this local magnate, or his consortium. And I'm pretty sure the murder victim was a guy named Charles Hall, who just absolutely knew too much and was going to definitely go back to prison if anybody identified him and might talk. So I believe that all of this was a giant cover-up of a murder to protect a very rich, very corrupt person from prosecution for burning his competition out and then burning down one of his own factories for the insurance money.
Now that sounds very believable to me. I just keep going back in my head to one question, and it comes back to the first guy we dismissed. But Andrew, you mentioned to me that when you were reading about it, that the finder of the body, this was not his first body find.
No, yeah, he had just a matter of time before, just a week or 2 weeks, had found another body. But he had also been dismissed in that case. But talk about weird
It could be bad luck, but
hey, that is very suspicious. I had not run across that tidbit. And Andrew, you're familiar with the area personally, right? So
yes.
Yes. So you would know that it didn't show up in the literature I saw, but obviously you would know from local folklore. But here's a question that I ran across that I wanted to ask you, but I did the segment before we got a chance to talk. Isn't there a place in Wallingford near the border that was called Shoebox Road? That was right near the reservoir. Yeah.
It's named after the murder.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't show up on like Google Maps as Shoebox Road. It shows up on like a route or something. But that's Shoebox Road, right? Like
it is, yes.
Now, do you happen to recall there was this bizarre kidnapping case, and I'm not sure on all of the details of it, but like it happened almost right at the spot near the reservoir that the body was found. It happened in, I think, the 1980s. It was
so much newer.
It was like somebody was kidnapped and almost killed, but held for ransom until the cops showed up and they surrendered. But it was like this really big thing, and it happened right on the exact same route. It was okay. Well, I guess not. So
that's really interesting. But I do think the fact that he found another body so close does make me come back to the suspicion of like, unless, then we could explain like he found a body, he's like, oh God, and then he sees a box and is like, not again, someone else has right. come and validate this.
And that's why you got to have people with you. That would make sense. Why it would be like, uh-oh, I smell corpse. Nope, no, I got to have people. Yeah, right.
He's like,
oh my God, not again.
This.
Not again. Well, the thing is like the Chicago connection, like, so I look, that all looks suspicious. I'm going to say personally, poor freaking guy, Edward Turl, poor freaking dude. Because, okay, the box did go from Chicago back to Wallingford, having started in Fall River, right? So, I mean, like, that's the only physical piece of evidence other than the torso of a dude that they had to go on, right?
Right.
So who would be likelier to have a box from Chicago? A dude named Edward Turl, who's just a Wallingford local walking his dog in a swamp, or a guy who owns a bunch of factories?
Fair enough. Fair enough. The box.
I got to stop you. I'm sorry, because the first ever appointed Wallingford chief of police was a guy named Danny O'Brien. Okay.
Irish guy.
No, Danny O'Reilly, which of course is an 1880s chief of police, right? Danny O'Reilly, Wallingford, Connecticut. So, and he was chief of police for like decades. Like he was a well-respected guy, loved him. He gave an interview. Now, again, this happened in the 1880s. He gives an interview in 1940. Okay. He lives a long time, and they ask him, because it's still part of the lore, what about the Shoebox Murder? What do you think happened? He claimed that he knew exactly who had committed the crime and why, but by the time he had figured it out and found out about it, the person had already passed and left behind an innocent wife and children.
Okay.
And he did not want to tarnish the reputations of people who had nothing to do with it. So Danny O'Reilly swore that he would take the information to the grave, and according to him, that's exactly what he did.
How frustrating for me.
I know, but the mystery endures. Right?
And
I mean, we don't know where it's going.
I mean, and it's funny, today of all days, I was reading this interesting article because I love Irish history about Michael Collins and how, he was, this original Irish Republican Army member who was murdered. And there's varying theories on who murdered him, but it's pretty collectively decided that it was a British person. So, all that being said, next year is the 100th anniversary of it. So someone was making a documentary about him. Makes sense. But the documentary due to come out is to propose that they exhume his remains, here 100 years later, because that a proper, cause of death and study on what happened hadn't been done. And all I could think was, I definitely support this in theory. However, what are we going to find out 100 years later from 1922?
Right.
What's going to be there to properly study and make any sort of conclusion? But it just kind of shows like it can be, 100 years, 130 years,
right.
60 years. We want to know these answers no matter what. Like it's going to be passed down through generations until it gets solved. And that's why the Wallingford Shoebox Murder still sort of in some ways defines that region as their biggest story of lore. But I can't help but laugh when I think about box murders in the 1800s or box bodies and how prevalent they were. We've mentioned strange things on the tour, but even Samuel Colt, who Andrew did a segment on last year, buried in Hartford via, the gunsmith and inventor of all these different revolvers. He had a
the gun that won the West.
Yes, and he was a shady businessman. We all know this, right? He didn't play fair or nice. However, even shadier than Samuel Colt is his brother. And his brother was, arrested for murder. And the whole thing was that he murdered this guy that had been bugging him, coming to his office and constantly bugging him to pay a minor debt that he didn't want to pay or whatever the case was. So he killed the guy, puts him in a box, right? A very long box. It's called the oblong box. And even I think it's Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe, yeah.
Writes about
that was a story. Yeah.
He writes it based on this case. So he puts him in the box and he apparently has to sit on the box and stand on the box, really push the guy in there. And then he's like, well, I can't get caught. So he just ships the box like he's shipping a package, like he gives it a destination and goes on a ship. And then the people in the ship are like, oh my God, there's something in this box, right? And then they find the body and he gets caught pretty quickly thereafter. All roads lead to him. His brother's a little mad because he's trying to start this really great business here and this isn't making him look good. So it gets sketchy, and basically Samuel has him marry a woman that he's impregnated while he's in prison, and then they set fire to the prison. Theoretically,
that old chestnut, happens.
They can't prove it.
Yeah.
And then, the brother supposedly is found having committed suicide, but then they have proof that he lived and escaped the prison. And it became this whole ridiculous thing. And then when people talk about Samuel Colt, they never talk about it. But all I can think about when I hear the boxes is the oblong box in that ridiculous story. And Andrew, you remember this too. They had weird, dark things happen even after that, right?
So many weird, dark things with the Colt family. I called it the Colt curse on my segment because it's just.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. I mean, Samuel has a kid with his wife and also one not, and one dies mysteriously and goes missing. But then I just read someone released a whole book, a Connecticut local, on the Colt curse and all the dark things that they think happened that link back to the box murder. That it was all in some way all of this retribution and all of this coming back at them. But it's really, really fascinating to think that, in the 1800s, our best way of disposing of a body was not even to put it back in the earth in an unknown location, but to put it in a box and see where it ends up. And like hope for the best. That's just the fact that this happened more than once is bizarre.
Well, you got to remember too, like this is the beginning. This is the apex of like the robber baron era, when people would business was literally killer, and the beginning of the mafia era. And
Right.
Connecticut happened to be both industrial and between Boston and New York. So
Yeah.
huge hub of immigrants from all over, huge hub for ruthless industrialists. So,
yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that we've talked a little bit about here at Seaside Shadows is developing a true crime tour at some point, because we seem to have so many wild stories in our area historically when it comes to these crimes. Like, look, we just talked about a few in a period of 20 minutes, but it's really fascinating to think about the fact that so many of them remain unsolved. And even historically, you think surely 100 years later, no one's protecting anybody, there's going to be answers, but there's not. And we just sort of have these bizarre things that, can't ever be figured out. So I think it would be cool to, dig a little bit into some of Connecticut's darker past. Yeah, no pun intended, and see what we can find out. I'm sure we'll find out some really bizarre things. And
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I did it. Your Michael Collins story inspired me to report something that actually did come from an exhumation of a public figure in the past that was sanctioned by the family and did yield an answer.
Oh, what is that? I'd love to know.
Well, not my direct descendant, but my great uncle, Zachary Taylor, 12th president of the United States,
yes,
was long rumored to have been murdered because he was a fence sitter. He was a slave owner who was opposed to the expansion of slavery, but he had this and he had that. And so he was sort of, it was a crucial point for the American Republic. And he supposedly died from eating clotted cream and cherries on a particularly hot Washington, D.C. day. And it gave him fatal indigestion. Believable, but people have long thought, maybe there was an extra ingredient in those cherries and clotted
believable,
cream.
But also admittedly a little peculiar.
Would be a little peculiar. Well, they finally dug up the corpse. Again, I'm not, he's a blood uncle, but it's a few generations past. So whoever is in charge of his stuff was like, whatever, dig him up. Let's see if he was murdered. And they did, and they were like, yeah, no arsenic, probably just died from eating spoiled cream on a hot day. But they got the answer, is the thing. Like, they were like, we could put to bed the whole poison conspiracy death of Zachary Taylor. So
yeah. There's been more stories that I think could have those types of answers, but one of the things that comes from not public figures like Michael Collins or Zachary Taylor is that, as shown in this story, not everyone's identified who's murdered.
Right.
Or is it noted anywhere where their remains came to be? Like, do these people get a burial? Where do they go? I did a segment out in Hamden about some folks that were murdered by an axe murderer. No record of where he was buried. He would pass of smallpox before his execution date. However, it literally says on the stones of the people he murdered by a madman, right? So, I think it's interesting how when something does come to such a violent end, we almost define that person's legacy if they're not a public figure. One of them even was in the town, higher up, but he's still defined by how he died. Right? So that's another interesting thing too, is how much, when we look at these stories, defines, that person's life. and how much is focused on the end of it. So it makes it quite curious. But it's definitely something that's still, you know, people love to try and solve true crimes. There's something in all of us that wants to figure out the answer. So maybe one day someone will figure out the Wallingford Shoebox murder and not take it to their grave like that nice Irish police
Danny
chief.
O'Reilly. Yeah.
Danny O'Reilly. I will quickly, before we give a few October updates to folks, touch on the other two segments we did recently. I did a Witchy Wednesday called Mabon. It's about it's a harvest festival. It's not quite Samhain, but it's when you're really starting to collect, you know, the fruits of things you've planted. So if you've been out apple picking or pear picking or, you know, peaches or anything right now, that is the season that you're starting to harvest your fruits. And that's been something long honored by our ancestors. So in the segment for Witchy Wednesday, I teach folks a little bit about apple magic, show you guys how to cut the apple so that you can see stars in it that are representative of the 5 elements and your senses. We talk a little bit about the stories of, you know, the goddesses and going to the underworld and Persephone and all that. So make sure to tune in and watch that. You are not too far off of Mabon, so you can talk about all of the, you know, the underworld, and it's the whole story of why we're starting to get darker days instead of lighter days. How, you know, in varying lore, there's always a goddess that has to spend time in the underworld because she was, you know, taken under there. Particularly, you know, Hades starts this, and, you know, now due to marriage has to spend time in the underworld, and that's why half the year is darker instead of light, when you can go back to the mom and, you know, live in the sun. So it's something to sort of bear in mind, that we honor a lot of these ancient traditions, and we don't always think about them when we're out apple picking and doing, you know, the fun harvest things that people think are so cute. They really come from some very deep rooted beliefs in a variety of our ancient cultures and pagan ancestors. And there's a lot of similarities, but it is a fire feast day. So it's a really great time to start planning on what you want to work on over the winter. And so definitely tune into that segment and sort of channel in your ancestors and have some fun with apples before pumpkin season really comes in a few days. Then lastly, the most recent cemetery Saturday I did was at the CVH hospital or the CVH hospital graveyard, I should say, in Middletown, Connecticut. So CVH is the Connecticut Valley Hospital. It was known in the 1800s as the Connecticut Hospital for the Insane, also the Hospital for the Criminally Insane. There were a variety of hospitals there that had, you know, what was considered very rudimentary mental health treatments. They were considered, oddly though, evolved for the time. And it was supposed to be one of the best mental health facilities in the Northeast. It was not, but, you know, and there were even some serial killers who were imprisoned there as well, including, if you've heard of Arsenic and Old Lace, the real story that's based on. And her name is escaping me, the murderess that it was based on, but she resided at CVH after she was caught murdering all those poor old people. Amy Archer Gilligan, I was just looking her up on the side. But yeah, poor those poor people, but she was housed there. But CVH, the segment I did is really fascinating because the cemetery itself is what we focus on. And the cemetery houses everyone who died in Connecticut Valley Hospital from the late 1800s when it was established, just after the Civil War, to, you know, about 1950. And because there was such a stigma associated with mental illness, they were not given names upon their graves because it was considered a shame upon the family that they had the mental illness. So instead of having names on their graves, of which there are over 1,800 on site, they had the numbers for them. So that is something that's kind of heartbreaking when you walk through there. However, there's a very interesting tale I came about, and it was around 1999, 2000. There was a local priest who was driving by, and he felt so drawn to the nameless graves that he thought, I really want to, identify them and sort of give them almost like a funeral or a blessing or this type of thing. So he went forth on a mission to identify each and every individual, making contact with living descendants, things like this. And now they have a whole memorial there that identifies each person at each number. And every year until he got to everybody, he would do a blessing for, 100 people and call them out by name, and folks in town would come and gather, starting in 2001. So they wrapped it up not too long ago, but now there's a beautiful monument that kind of is about acknowledging mental illness in a way that is without stigma and acknowledging these people's lives. Because when we discuss mental illness in regards to CVH and how important these stories are, some of these people just had, dementia. Some of these people, they had husbands who, were bored with them and thought that they were just too depressed all the time. So put them in the hospital. Some of these folks maybe committed a small petty crime and would be put in there and thought criminally insane. So
I think it's likelier that the husbands weren't satisfying the wives, and that's what drove the wives crazy.
Oh, for
crazy.
sure.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
One story was that, and this fascinated me. There was a guy who painted sort of all of like the caravans and things for P.T. Barnum's circus, but they used these lead-based paint and all of these chemicals. So he started going a little bit, weird with his memory. And then one day he didn't come home. And for generations, the family was told, oh yeah, he just went out and died. No one knows what happens. They found out that he was in CVH for decades. And, his son and his grandson's the one that found out, and granddaughter, that they had been lied to. Another person wrote that they got a knock on the door as a grandkid and were told their whole life that their grandfather had passed away. And they found out that he had just now passed away at CVH, and he hadn't been told that whole time he had been in there. And his father didn't even know, his own child. So when they would go in, there wasn't even like this discussion with the family. It was almost like it was a death sentence. So there is this haunting aspect to it. However,
and that lasted until, that's lasted until recent times. I mean, like,
oh yeah.
It's a fictional show, but this is based on real stuff. You watch The Sopranos, they talk about that there was somebody who was mentally disabled, mentally handicapped, and they never knew. It was just like boom, gone. Like that person is erased. Just found out that oh, sorry, you had an uncle, and he's dead now. We can tell you now because he's dead, and the shame he had a Christian burial, so now we can tell you because the shame's gone.
Right. And what's also fascinating is when I was reading the articles from the early 2000s about this, they kind of put out a call like for family members to start coming to these, annual blessings, if you will. Mm-hmm. And not that many came, very few came. And that makes me think that more than we know had no idea that they had an ancestor or relative that was in there. And it's strange to me too to think about how we have these people who just had dementia or a depression, and then they are quite literally next to a serial killer for real. Right. And there I pulled up some old articles where some of the patients were writing to the newspapers saying that they were being mistreated in there, that the guards and nurses were robbing them of their personal effects, treating them monstrously. So there's a lot of really haunting things to it, but there was something that kind of, in addition to the memorial, I found quite beautiful. And that was that there were dragonflies all over the cemetery when I was there, all over, which is a sign of hope and rebirth. And so to me, I love that they're kind of living at their grave sites, almost, showing that cleansing or rebirth for their soul, to not have to live in that stigma. And it is really, really lovely to kind of feel that there. And there's not the heaviness that you would expect, which makes me think that there was this release for them. But I do think it's important we acknowledge, the history of mental health and these hospitals. And we have it, right in our backyard in central Connecticut. And so that was something to, really, Marty was with me and he was like, my school bus drove down here every day and I never thought about it, right? We just get so used to it. So bringing their names out and acknowledging their humanity is something that we can each do, just by learning about them. So definitely something to bear in mind. And that was a very interesting cemetery Saturday for me to do. And of course, if you guys have any questions later about any of them, don't hesitate to let us know. But I do want to come in with a couple October updates for you guys, and then we'll let you folks go and enjoy the rest of your Monday night. But so we have so many good things coming up in October, but we are so busy that what I have decided is that these segments are Cemetery Saturday, Spooky Story Sunday, and Witchy Wednesday for October are going to be paused. We're not going to release any new big segments in October. Reason being, we can't clone ourselves for the month of October as much as we would like to. And we want to make sure that we give you guys all that you deserve in the segments. So what you can do in the meantime, we are still doing our Patreon. There's still time to sign up for September, where you get 2 months worth of content for just $5 a month. We are still doing our Patreon in October as well. So we will still be creating virtual content for that platform. And then we'll come back in November and resume our segments. I am also going to be releasing, and so are Andrew and Evan, even though they don't necessarily know it yet, more TikTok and Instagram Reels in October. So Riley, who you may have seen on our social media page, is going to be putting together some really great videos, short videos. So you'll still get stuff in October, just not the full big stories. And it's only for October. We'll be back. So sign up for Patreon if you really miss us until then. We would love to see you on there. But I wanted you guys to know that. I've thought long and hard about it, and I thought, oh my gosh, we just can't do it all as much as we want to. However, good news is October comes, and so do so many extra tours and events. So we are still operating our tours 6 nights a week. We have graveyard tours in October only 4 nights a week. So you're going to be able to go Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday on a graveyard tour if you would like. We are also going to be doing our downtown tours Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So those are all going to be going out all month long. And then as we get closer to Halloween on the last 2 Saturdays, on the 23rd and 30th, we're also going to have 9:15 graveyard tours. So a little bit later at night, a little bit darker. And then if you're very brave, on the 23rd and 30th, we have our burial ground investigations from 11:30 until 2 a.m. on those 2 nights. So those are kind of, the regular tours are going to be, up and running, as much as possible so that you can get all your spirit friends with you for Halloween. We are also going to be doing 2 Elm Grove cemetery tours on Sundays in October. So we have October 10th and October 24th. So if you guys have really been liking the Memento Mori photography series on Facebook, which thank you everyone for participating in that. And it entertains me in the best way to read all of your answers and theories as to why you're guessing who you're guessing is dead in the photos. Good news is none of you are totally wrong ever, because they're all dead now. But I love reading about who you guys guess, and really delivering the good news when you do guess correctly. So we are working to get more memento mori photos up for you. That being said, it does take quite some time to extract them, and I have to give myself a mental brain break from staring at photos of dead folks all day. So I'm working on it though. And if you are really into Victorian history, death practices, spiritualism, all of the weird things they did, definitely take an Elm Grove tour on October 10th or 24th, and you'll get your full, history and mystery of that era. We love sharing that with you. We also have boat tours coming up. So October 22nd, Shoreline Epidemics is sold out right now. October 15th, Wicked Waters of Mystic. Our 615 tour is almost sold out. Oh, Marty's making an appearance.
Hey, Marty.
Our 615 tour is almost sold out. I think we have 3 left for that. Then here's the thing, folks, and I want to hear from you about this. We have a 4:30 tour going out that day, but it's a Friday, and I know you're getting out of work, and you might not be out of work. So if you would prefer a late night tour at, say, 8 p.m., message us, let us know. We're going to make a decision in the coming days about doing a later night boat tour on that evening. So that we will make an announcement for soon. We also just announced our Paranormal Pub Crawl on October 28th. Those tickets are almost sold out as well. So hop on in there and get some tickets. We're going to be going down the haunted quarter of Water Street. We're partnering with one of our favorite local breweries called Barleyhead Brewery. And we're going to be sampling different beers of theirs along the way at our favorite haunts. So that Paranormal Pub Crawl is one night only on October 28th. Am I forgetting things? Of course I am. October 20th, we are hosting a spooky story dinner at the Captain Daniel Packer Inn. We will be there telling spooky stories to dinner guests, and they're going to deck the place out all gothic and dark and make their fabulous food for everybody. And then on November 10th, we will be back at Daniel Packer Inn with the most requested event I think I've had for the past couple of years, and that is our murder mystery dinner. We'll be back on November 10th, and we are so excited about it. We also heard that you guys wanted some weekend Salem virtual tours. So we have 3 weekends in October that virtual Salem is going to be going out. I'm looking at it right now. I have October 2nd going out, the 16th, and I think there's another one and I just don't see it. Oh, the 29th. Marty's good. He remembers. October 2nd, 16th, and 29th, we're going to be doing more virtual Salem tours. So if you are really not feeling like going out and walking around, you can log in and watch those. Is there anything else? Probably. So if so, you can visit our website, seasideshadows.com, and you can click special events or calendar, and that will let you know everything. Ireland details are still coming up. This new package we're working on will include flights, so we'll be releasing those details very soon. And also, we just confirmed that on January 8th, mark your calendars, we will be doing our annual investigation with John Zaffis, and we will be doing it at the Guard Arts Theatre in New London, backed by popular demand. So we are very, very excited for that. And we are working on new tour routes, wink, wink, and we'll be doing that over the winter. So I think that covers almost everything. If you have any questions, you guys can log onto our website, message us, let us know, keep participating in everything you can, and tell your friends about us. And hopefully we will be spooking you soon. So have a great night, everybody, and we'll talk to you in November. Yeah, and get some merch. See, Evan's sporting it. He's doing a great job modeling it. Get some merch. It's on our Seaside, and Andrew too. I'm not doing it. Oh gosh, do what they do and what I say. Go to our store and buy our merch and we'll send it to you. We have both the I Got Spooked t-shirts and the Seaside Shadows logo t-shirts. We have the books on there. My new book will be out next month. Oh, and all of the Witchy Wednesday tinctures. Marty's got that. Lavender water, rosemary water, Isis healing brew. Those are all available online as well. So we will be seeing you not in October on here, but in November. And we look forward to it then. So have a great spooky season, and hopefully we'll see you on tour. Bye, everybody.